right, welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today my guest is Dean Sikes, and Dean's going to talk about something terrible, which is the kind of scourge of unhappy kids. And we're going to talk about suicide and what's going on in that world and what's happening to teenagers and kids today. And he's the author of 33 books. The man is prolific, speaking all over the country on this subject and doing what he can to make sure that we are taking care of our youth. Dean, welcome to the show.
Bryce, thank you so much. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I have been following kind of what's happened, obviously, and you're going to talk about this with me, but, suicide and, unhappy kids and all of that has been, throughout history. I mean, people are plagued by those mental health issues and depression and everything, but it seems like it has really ramped up over the years. And I've got my opinions on why and what's gone on, but I'd love to really get your thoughts. But first, go over just briefly who you are, your bio, and how you got to be dealing with this issue.
Sure. I've been speaking in high schools now since January 1st, 1993. So over 3.5 decades, right at 3.5 decades of just sharing a message of hope with teenagers, a message that says, God loves you, he's got a plan for your life, and because you're breathing, you matter. I've spoken it with 2.5 million students at live events. We've now done over 4,300 events, just constantly on the road, sharing this message with young people. We live in Tennessee, married. Lori and I have 3 adult kiddos, grandparents, and enjoying that side of life. But our whole mission is to eradicate hopelessness and to help end teenage suicide. And to that end, that is a daily quest of ours.
Yeah, amen. Well, what part of Tennessee, by the way?
Chattanooga, southeast, about an hour and a half north of Atlanta.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I split my time and travel a lot in Nashville. So
okay, yep.
Yeah, so I love Tennessee. I love the folks in Tennessee, and it's great to be able to go there often. Although I've only been to Chattanooga a couple of times. It's a beautiful area,
and it's growing like crazy.
Yeah, I'll bet. So, I told you I've got my thoughts and opinions on why it seems to have ramped up. And I don't know, you tell me this, but have suicide rates ramped up or just, hopelessness? Because it seems like there is a malaise and a hopelessness that is so pervasive now that didn't seem to exist when even I was a young man. But have the rates of suicide gone up dramatically?
Oh yeah, yes. The very first convention where I was a keynote was in 1993, first quarter of '93, and at that particular convention, I asked this question: how many students here today have a cell phone? There were 600 kids in the audience. 3 raised their hands. Today, I've asked that question, and there's 600 students there. Every single one of them will raise their hand.
Yeah.
Now, in pre-COVID, it was 5,240 teenagers attempt suicide every day. Post-COVID, it's 5,600. Let me give you a visual to consider. If you're standing in the center of an arena that seats 12,000 people and you're looking at 12,000 empty seats, over the next 2.5 days, every one of those seats will be taken by a young person who in the previous 60 hours bought the lie that their life did not matter and they attempted to end their life.
Yeah.
So hopelessness is the fuel that drives a young person or any person to a place of desperation. Because if a person doesn't feel seen or they don't feel heard, they'll buy the lie more times than not that their life really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was really shocked because we had a family member that had expressed that they felt invisible. And that, of course, is not true because it is a lie because, the family, loves this person. I mean, this was, somebody that's, dear to everybody's heart. They talk about with great affection and all that stuff, but they still had that idea and that thought that they were invisible. And I think that's, more common than it should be as something that people, even big personalities feel like they are not seen, not heard, or invisible. And And there's, people that you would be surprised feel that way, that they're anything, they're anything but
Right.
invisible in life. And so I find that such an interesting thought that people can hold in their head. But I do think that it is because of the proliferation of media, social media, screens,
Yep.
that tell these kids that they're, worthless because they don't have the same lives that are being falsely projected, on social media, and, in these little narratives on TikTok and everything else that's
Yep.
being pushed out there.
The average teenager, according to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, will spend up to 9 hours a day on their phone. Now, I grabbed my phone not long ago, and I just wanted to test it myself. So I went over to TikTok, and I just started scrolling. 48 minutes later, I looked up, and I thought, where did those 48 minutes go?
Yeah.
It's very addictive. And here's what I tell teenagers in high schools all the time. For me, in our outreach, I count our views. That's just a good measuring stick for us. I do not count our likes, and here's why. If a young person, or any person for that matter, is counting their likes, still counting their likes, in my view, they have no idea how much they're loved, because they're trying to find their value on what someone else says about them.
Yeah. And that's such a dangerous thing too, because, people, viewing things, I mean, they might like your content, but, people aren't always, pushing the like buttons. People aren't always, they're, first of all, most people are so wrapped up in their own lives that they're never thinking about, oh, I need to validate this person by making sure I like or heart their messages.
Yep, you're right.
I mean, it's kind of absurd that we've lived in that world. I think also, and you tell me what you think about this, but young men don't labor as much as they used to, or work, from summer jobs to just chores around the house, or mowing the lawns, or things like that. And God designs us to be productive. And if you are, sitting, on a couch all day long, or walking like a zombie, flipping through your phone, you're not doing anything.
No.
There's nothing productive about consuming media. And if you're consuming media, you're just not meeting kind of your basic intrinsic need of being productive. And I don't think these kids even know that is a real need that we have, just on a psychological and a soul basis.
Well, I totally, completely agree with you, because when I see teenagers, and I do it, at least, I travel all the time, so I'm in restaurants all the time when I'm out on the road, and I oftentimes will find myself just staring. I'll have our team with us at a sitting down having dinner after I've spoken somewhere, getting ready to speak, and I'll look around and I'll just see families. I'll see what appears to be husband and wife, and let's say there's 4 people at a table. Almost every single time I look, they're all looking down at their phones individually.
Yeah.
They've lost the art of communication.
Going back, I mean, this would have been, my kids would have been, 8, 9, and 5, kind of a thing. My daughters, and we went, out for my wife's birthday to a Ruth Chris steakhouse, and we had pumped it up with the kids that we were going to go eat some of the best steak on earth, and it was one of my favorite restaurants at the time, and we had wait staff and other patrons come by our table and say, "Wow, your kids are amazing," and just remark on my girls. And it was a couple of things that when I looked around, I noticed. Number one, we had them order their own food, looking the waitress or waiter in the eye, asking for what they wanted, and kind of laying that out and engaging. And, we homeschooled, so, those kids are far more engaging and able to, look at adults and relate to people, across all age groups a little bit more, I think. But they were also they were musicians, still are, violinists, and they were discussing around the table what their favorite pieces were and their favorite composers right then were, and they're talking about that, and they're describing these things. And so patrons and the wait staff is hearing this, and so they're hearing this conversation going around the table. And then when I looked around the place after it was like, person after person came up and said something, I saw everybody, else in the restaurant with kids. They had headphones on and a screen in front of their face.
Yep.
Except for me and my family and Adam Sandler and his kid who was there, which I thought was interesting. He had a couple of kids, and I think they were also daughters, if I remember correctly. And he was sitting across the table from them, and they were engaging and talking and all that stuff. And I thought that was kind of a fun little thing. Was hey, shout out to Adam Sandler.
Sure. Yeah. I look around at young people today, and I look at their home life, and for me, Bryce, I grew up in a Christian home, and here in the Southeast, very conservative family. We were in church every time the doors were open. I went to Christian schools. All my friends were Christians. And I had a couple of defining moments in my life. And I think for everyone in your audience today, that everyone will have, if they have not, they will have defining moments that kind of shape the trajectory of their lives. For me, at 7, I became a Christian. At 15, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was sexually abused. And that sexual abuse, that just changed my life forever. That night after I had been at my so-called friend's home, had been abused, went to church, came home, I looked in the mirror, and I saw shame and brokenness immediately. And I made a vow, I'll never tell anybody what happened to me. I'll never let this happen again. And that was a 15-year-old kid. 17, I failed PE, even though I played quarterback, taught tennis, and played golf. I was plenty athletic. Wasn't going to change clothes. But at 21, the defining moment of my life happened when I said this very simple prayer. I said, God, it's me. I don't think you're real. I feel stupid talking to the wind. But if I'm wrong, and if you have a plan for my life, and more importantly, if you're real, prove it. That's my little prove it prayer.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my office, I'm dialing a phone, and I share this with audiences every day of my life. I'm in this office, and I had whatever society says makes you successful, and I was miserable. And I hear behind me, off to my left, 2 words, call mom. I swung around, saw no one, but the hair on the back of my neck knew to call my mom. And I dialed my parents' phone number, and the phone rang 7 times. On the 8th ring, my mother answered the phone. And when she said hello, I knew instantly something was really wrong. Her voice was slurred. She was disoriented. I'm convinced God, who was so very real, spoke to me and said, call mom. When I did so, my mother was attempting suicide. I drove up Interstate 75 for 20 minutes, got to my parents' neighborhood. From the outside in, their home looked fine. It was safe, secure, probably like where we live. But from the inside out, my mom was dying. I see multiplied millions of students. From the outside in, they appear to have it all together. But from the inside out, they're in their own private wars. Yeah. I got my mom to a hospital that day. A doctor began to work with her. 45 minutes later, this doctor walked over to my dad and said, there's no other way to tell you this. It's a, quote, miracle of God. She's fine. She's alive. She'll be going home soon. You can go see her. In that moment, my life changed, and I began to understand that what you overcome will eventually become your platform. And so that began me on this journey. And that little story I just shared with you, I share every day in schools or on social or however. And students respond to it because they want to know that their lives matter. That if they weren't here, we would all be missing someone, and someone very, very special. That's why I wrote this book called You Matter. It's about getting the message out. Not just that you do matter, but why do you matter?
Mm-hmm. So if some of these issues that are happening today, like the screens and social media, are such a problem. By the way, I mean, you mentioned sexual abuse there. I mean, I think these kids, because of what they're consuming, both intentionally and inadvertently, are getting sexually abused. Through these social media apps. I mean, you think about also how quickly young men or little boys can access pornography, which will forever change the nature of their brains. Yeah. When you see all of that, and you see that it is so prolific, and in fact in these schools, the schools are giving them tablets and computers, and they're it's like it's one of these things that you have to use to exist in this society, but it's the most dangerous and addictive thing at the same time. How are you communicating to these kids to contain that stuff? How are you teaching them to contain that stuff? What is the answer?
I'll give you a answer. For us, in the last 24 months, we've had about 148 million views of our videos on social media. So every high school I go into, literally teenagers come up to me and go, "Hey, I watch you on TikTok or I watch you on Insta," and I'm very grateful. So for us, it's a continual process of creating content that allows a young person to know your life matters because you are breathing. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And I wrote a devotional book that we freely give online to students, 365 daily devotions that any teenager anywhere on the planet can download at no cost, and they can have a daily interaction with the creator of the universe himself. Just a very simple devotional. So when we go in, students, what they seem to embrace the most is I don't try to talk them into something. And here's why. If I can talk you into something, somebody a lot better than me can talk you out of it.
That's right.
I just want to share what I believe to be as truth, and truth is always true. It never changes. And so the basics of what I share is, about a year ago, we got a phone call from a Native American Indian reservation school system. And there was, at that point online, a very dangerous, what they termed game online that was showing students how and why to end their lives. And sadly, three of the kids in their reservation had actually ended their lives. And they said, "Can you just please come?" Well, we don't ever charge anybody anything for our nothing. So I said, "Yeah, we'll change what we need to change." We changed some dates, and we went down there, and I went to every school. And I realized going into that population, these kids were so desperate to know truth, that their life did matter. They just wanted to know that somebody cares, that somebody actually will take the time to listen. Because sadly, Bryce, in America, I've been all over the world with this message. I see it a lot in America. The family unit has been so broken that young people don't. When was the last time families sat around a table and just did what you and your kids and your wife did at Ruth's Chris? Just had a conversation, just opened the dialogue up. For I share with students, they go, "Well, I don't have anything in common with my parents." Well, find something in common. You're breathing the same air, you live in the same home. I mean, is it sports? Is it theater? Is it music? Is it education? Is it politics? What is it that gets you interested in this journey we know is life? And how can you embrace that journey? And how can you then become productive in it? Because here's what I share. If my hand is a mirror, I ask students, do you see, when you look in your mirror, do you see what God sees? And these kids look at me like I'm from Mars, like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. That gives me the opportunity to then begin to gently unpack the truth that you were created on purpose and with purpose and for purpose. You're an original. There's not another person like you anywhere on the planet. There's something that you're here to do. Let's figure it out, because it's not yours to decide, it's yours to discover. And that discovery is a journey of a lifetime.
Yeah, and it's an important journey, and it's interesting because I have three of the most beautiful daughters in all the land, and my girls, and especially going through the teenage years, I mean, what they saw in the mirror was the ugliest human beings on earth. I mean, it's amazing that is um the reality of what many of these kids see is not somebody of great value, but they'll see all and every of their flaws, and even many that don't exist. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I know that especially for young women, social media and filters and things like that are presenting something so different than what reality really is.
Yep.
And I tried to communicate to them, sometimes successfully, that those and my girls, what's interesting is, didn't have social media and weren't spending time on those things. I mean, they didn't really even have any accounts like that or anything until very late into their teens. I mean, it just didn't exist, and yet they were still in their early teens thinking that they were ugly ducklings.
Sure.
So my concern is, even with us giving them those words that God does love them and they do matter and they are here to discover, that pressure of what society is kind of foisting on all of us just to exist in the stream of commerce even. it's creating, such a pressure. Um, how do you have recommendations for parents, or, more importantly, those kids, on how to, protect themselves and limit some of that exposure? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, we have. A story that I can share with you. I spoke at a school out in the Dakotas, and when I got through, a young lady walked up to me, and just this vivacious, full of personality, great looking young lady. And just I asked the principal to stand there with me, because I always, the accountability is real important to have. If you're going to speak to a young lady, have another grown adult lady there, just to make sure that everything's cool. And this young lady begins to unpack her story with me, and she begins to tell me how she's the captain of the cheerleading squad. She's got like a 3.8 GPA, comes from a great home. Everything's wonderful in her life. And then suddenly the tears come, and I go, "Tell me what's going on." And she goes, "I have an eating disorder. I've never told anybody."
Mm.
And I said, let's talk about that, because it's not about food. It's about control. Let's unpack what are you trying to control? What's happened? And the Bible teaches us, it's in Proverbs, the Living Bible, that open communication permits progress. So one of the things when I share with and talk with parents, I often tell them and share with them, open the door of communication. You've got to do that. You're the parent. It's like, if you're dealing with, I'm talking to fathers or dads, there's a big difference between the two. My understanding, dads give you what you want, but fathers give you what you need. And so when's the last time a father sat down with his or her, his daughters or sons, and sat down and had a conversation about, what are the top 3 priorities in your life? What do you base those priorities on? What are your principles on which you base your life? Is it based on pride, or is it based upon love? Is it based, how do you see yourself? Because if we can get a young person to understand the originality of who they are, that, the devil has never told the truth. The best-selling book of all times refers to him as the father of liars. So when a young person begins to hear those lies, if truth is not resonant in their heart, those lies sink down deep, and they they basically anchor the soul. And so one of the things that we get to do in sharing this message with students is invite them to fully understand, what is it that the enemy knows about your life, that he's petrified you're going to get there, and he's given you all of these lies. That's why suicide is it's what I attack every day of my life, because I see on the other side of that, the potential you've got. You may be the 1 in a million we're all waiting on. And maybe you don't see anybody doing the one thing that you have discovered that is yours to do. Maybe you don't see anyone doing it, because we're all waiting on you to go do it. And that's when the aha moment hits. They're like, oh, maybe it is me. Maybe I am supposed to do this. So the open communication is a big deal. I'm a big believer in getting truth into us, whether it's watching truth, listening to truth, reading truth, getting that into your heart in such a deep-rooted way that you're not going to be moved by any doctrine that just kind of floats around. You're not going to buy the lie that your life doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's great. And if I could, give advice to parents, and you can tell me whether you agree with this or not, but when your kids are little, you can absolutely, restrict and monitor screens and screen usage, and what they're consuming, and it's so easy for parents to, use electronic babysitters and not engage at the tables, and, things like that. And the temptation is real. But you as a parent need to really fight that. When they get older, if you're trying to restrict it later on, at a certain point, that battle is a losing battle, and you can't do it anymore. And so you have to figure out how to engage them, so that discipline comes from them. Those choices come from them, where they decide, I'm not interested in spending all day, scrolling on these things. I'm going to go out and do productive things, or be involved in, sports and hobbies, and fun and important things, including work.
Yeah.
But if you think you're going to change them, by the authority of your, parental
No.
position, it's just not going to work.
No.
You've got to get them to own it. And again, I think the best thing is, prevent them from developing those habits early, and, when their brains are soft and mushy. But you've got to get them to own it, and decide later on, and you got to help them. I mean, part of that Bible verse, train your child up in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart, is you've got to figure out what their gifts are alongside them. What,
That's right.
what is their purpose? Help them to find their purpose, and you'll be, much further along and have a better relationship.
I could not agree more. It's the whole thing about you, and you said it, the gifts. The Bible tells us that the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. And I look at that and I've studied that a lot, and I've seen that the gifts are plural, but the calling is singular. I believe there's one thing where each of us are called to do in our own way, but all of our gifts help make that calling something that we can then attain. And so whether you're in communication or whether you're just, you're off the charts brilliant and you do other things with that, whatever it is your calling is, that's never going to change. You're called to do what you're called to do. And that's one of the neatest journeys, I think, as a parent, we can enter into with our kids, is help them begin to identify, what do you enjoy? I mean, for me, crazy example, growing up as a little kid, my mom would ask me this question: Dean, what would you like to do that would be like eating bubblegum ice cream for you? Because I love bubblegum ice cream, still do to this day. And I would think about it, and I had a slant towards something in the communication world. I was just communicating, and through all the years, it's become so obvious that this was what I was called to do. And so finding that thing that unlocks that gifting, that calling, is a real opportunity for parents to take seriously, because, when the families get back together and the family unit is restored to what I believe to be the original intent of the family unit, I think society as we know it is going to have a whole different look. I've shared this message in Russia, in Australia, in South Africa, in England, down in the Caribbean, and all over America. I don't know how many hundreds of times. And I see it everywhere I go. I see kids desperate for attention, desperate to be validated, desperate to be heard, desperate to be seen. And there's only one reason: they're not getting it at home.
Yeah. Well, and the danger, and maybe you can speak on this, is if we aren't doing it as, Christian leaders, and we don't have you out there and others, speaking that same message, then that allows the people that are telling these young girls that, the answer is puberty blockers, or, they must have been born in the wrong body. And they have preyed on those kids in
Yep.
that way. And it's a, I think one of the greatest evils I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely. I had a young man in a school, and I'd finished speaking. I'd spoken to a lot of students after the assembly, and I was getting ready to leave, and I was stopped by our executive director. He said, "There's one more student I really think you should talk to." And I said, "Sure." So I walked over. And this young man was standing against this wall and just waiting, and he was already crying, and he began to unpack his story and began to tell me what he now believed about himself. And I said, "Tell me more about why you believe this. Not what you believe, but why." And immediately he went to, "I've been bullied my entire life." And he looked at me I'll never forget this guy, Bryce. With tears streaming down his face, he looked at me and said, "Do I still matter?" And I went, "Oh man, yeah, you matter. You desperately matter." And it's for me, the most unimaginable, painful 25 minutes of my day, 5 days a week, was going into that cafeteria as a high school student and having lunch, because I was bullied.
Mm.
And I just wanted to blend in. I just wanted to disappear. I just wanted lunch to come and go. And I share that from stage, and it might surprise you. It may surprise your listeners and your viewers how many students come up afterwards and say, "Man, you were telling my story. That's exactly how I feel." So what's the point? People need people that can, if nothing else, be a listening ear.
Yeah.
If you can't do anything else as a parent right now, just for the love of God, just sit down and listen. Let them have a place, a space. Because here's what happens. Broken teenagers become broken adults.
Yep.
And brokenness attracts brokenness, like health attracts health. And when two become one, and when broken become one, they recreate brokenness.
That's right.
You know what? I feel led to say this. I'm just going to say it. 22 years after I'd been sexually abused. At this point, I'm married. I have 3 kids. And Lori, my wife, says, "Will you go to Home Depot?" And that sentence in and of itself is hilarious, because I'm not a fixer person. But I said yes. I'll go to Home Depot with 2 of my kids, walk down aisle 21, turn right, and I literally walked right into the person who 22 years earlier had sexually abused me.
Wow.
My life unraveled in that moment. I squeezed my kids' hands so hard they both screamed. Went home. Lori said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Give me an hour." Put our kids to bed. We went outside, and I said, 22 years ago, something happened to me. I've never had the guts to tell anybody. But I'm going to tell you. I told her what happened. I said, "Tonight I saw the person." And here's the takeaway from me. If you and I do not deal with our emotions will deal with us.
Oh yeah.
And it's painful.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I went through a journey, and say all that to say this. There was a day that I forgave the person who sexually abused me. And here's what happened in my life. When I forgave, I got free.
Yeah. Amen.
And that freedom bolstered our outreach and ministry to where now I share that story every day that I'm on the road. And here they come after the assemblies.
Amen.
They tell me their stories. And we talk
Amen.
about forgiveness.
Wow. Well, Dean, how do we follow you? If we want to, have you speak, if we want to see you somewhere, if we want to read your book, give us all of it, please.
Okay. For the book, it's now out. It just came out. You can go to youmatterbook.us, just youmatter book.us. That gets you directly to the book, and it gives you all the details on it. We're very pleased with what's happening on the book. It's helping a lot of people. And then just for all of the things, just youmatter, youmatter.us. That takes you to our website. And as I said earlier, we never charge. That was my mandate when I began this ministry, to never charge anyone anything. We never have. We never will. So you can imagine we have a lot of opportunities to go and speak, and I love the opportunities to do so. Just Dean Sikes on all the social media handles, all of our content's out there. And Bryce, I really appreciate you giving me some time today to get to share our message, a little bit of it with you and your audience.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it is such an important message, and it's something that, we shouldn't ignore, because it is a scourge right now, and it has gotten worse, and we need to do what we can as parents and mentors and coaches and everything else. So thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you, Dean. To God be the glory, and we are out. Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.